That works. Good. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Scrutiny Programme Committee. Today we're looking at the crime and disorder scrutiny and Safer Swansea community safety. So I'll just go through the agenda. First of all, apologies for absence we've had from Councillor Mike White, Sue Jones and Victoria Holland. Do we know of any other apologies at all? No? Okay, thank you. Just for the benefits of those meeting online, can people say, I'm going to go around the room, people can say who they are. So I'm going to start with me and go that way. So I'm Councillor Peter Black, I'm the chair of the committee. Sam.
Good afternoon, Samantha Jenkins, Democratic Services Officer.
Good afternoon, Councillor Wendy Lewis, Wynarlwy Ford.
Councillor Chris Howley, Cumbola.
Councillor Hayley Gillam, Cabinet Member for Community Support Services.
Councillor Matthew Jones, Llansamlet Ward.
Councillor Adam Davis, Luca Ward.
Councillor Cyril Anderson, Town Hill Ward.
Jessica Williams, Community Safety Manager for South Wales Police.
James Raddy, Chief Inspector in the Community Safety Department with South Wales Police.
Afternoon, everyone. Paul Thomas, Community Integration and Partnerships, Swansea Council.
Good afternoon, Chris Truscott, Chief Superintendent, BCU Commander for Swansea, Neath Port Talbot.
Good afternoon, Mark Kavanagh, Superintendent, South Wales Police.
Afternoon all, Jane Whitmore, Strategic Lead for Commissioning and Resources, Swansea Council.
Good afternoon, Bridge Meadowhall from the Council's Scrutiny team.
Thank you, everyone. Also good practice with the microphones as well. Thanks, everybody. Right, so next item is disclosure of personal and prejudicial interest. Wendy?
Yeah, my son and daughter-in-law are police officers.
Okay. Mark?
Yeah, my brother's a police officer with South Wales Police.
Okay. Cyril?
Yeah, my nephew's a police officer in the Met.
Okay. We're going that far, are we? Anybody else? Okay. I'm not going to declare my brother the National Crime Agency then. Okay, right. So that's it. Online. Oh yeah. Sorry. Yes. Who's that? Beth.
I'm just going to say my husband works in the probation service, but I don't know if that's relevant. But there we are.
Okay. Right. Is that everybody? Okay. Thank you very much. There are forms which will be passed around. Please fill in the forms to do that. Okay. Thank you. Next item is prohibition of whip votes and declaration of party whips. No one has anything to declare, I see. No, okay. So then the minutes of the last meeting from the 19th of March, which mainly relates to the Welsh Language Standards Annual Report and the Annual Complaints and Compliments Report. So I just go through those meetings page by page for accuracy. So page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, and page 5. Are we happy those are accurate? Okay, thank you very much. In that case, I'm now going to move on to the main public question time first. I don't think we have any public questions at all. No, okay. In that case, I'm going to move on to item 6, which is the crime and disorder scrutiny with the Safer Swansea Community Safety Partnership. Can I welcome the host of contributors? I think you've all introduced yourselves, but I'm going to ask Councillor Alison Anthony, the Cabinet Member for Wellbeing, to introduce this report. Then I'm going to ask Superintendent Chris Truscott if he wants to say a few words as well. So, Alison.
Okay, thanks, Chair, and apologies for not being able to be there today. But I would like to say to the Scrutiny Programme Committee, thank you for asking us back today and giving us the opportunity to report over the last year and to address your concerns. The report before you will help to demonstrate how the partnership works and how collaboratively we address serious concerns. You will see the responses to your request for further information attached. The partnership strives to make Swansea a safer and more cohesive place to work, and we can only do this as a collective group of organisations who, agree to work to the priorities, the 6 priorities that have been set. We have regular updates in relation to them. And, these areas of work are complex, and as a local authority, we couldn't possibly do this on our own. We couldn't tackle them as one organisation. We rely on everyone around the table to work together to address the concerns and to be constantly looking for ways to tackle problems. We have all worked with the scrutiny panel on the ASB inquiry over the last year, which was a very long and thorough inquiry, and the recommendations and action plan, Chair, are before Cabinet now on the 18th of April. So I'd just like to thank all the people involved with all this work, our officers and everybody else around the table and further who have helped, and therefore we're here to and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Alison. Chief Superintendent, do you want to say a few words? Or?
Yep, thanks, Chair. I'll start with an apology, probably because there's different people in part who were sat here from the last time that we saw you, which is the nature of policing. As I'm sure you're aware, hopefully we'll get to come back and you'll see the same faces in the next meeting. It's great to be back in Swansea. I was here previously back in 2015 and 16. I live between Neath and Swansea, so in Pontardawe at the moment, so I have a vested interest in the area and look forward to working with you. One of my main conversations since I've arrived back here in October is about how we enhance the Safer Swansea partnership. So my conversations with the leader and the chief exec are about how do we take that to the next level, set against the financial backdrop, which is less than encouraging, I think. So how do we step closer together rather than step apart, which we may have done previously? Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Right, so if we go straight into questions then in that case. So if I kick off, I'm just referring to page 13 on the agenda, which is the table which you've got there. The first question, we got some performance data here that relates to the priorities. I'm not quite clear why you're comparing the 2023 performance against 2019-20 rather than 2022. Can someone help with that, perhaps?
So I think the figures there relate to antisocial behaviour. So when the force have tried to draw comparisons to years where we experienced lockdowns in the UK, particularly in relation to ASB, we were getting quite a bit of false data. So in order to make sure we make accurate reflections, we do go back to the year preceding COVID, particularly around ASB, which is when there would have been some normal, what we would call normal movement of people within the community. So that's why we make that comparison specifically around ASB.
Okay, well, ASB is in there, but also you've got knife crime, drug offences, burglary, robbery, rape, sex stalking, domestic abuse, missing people, mental health, shoplifting. So it isn't just antisocial behaviour in there.
Yeah.
I mean, you're showing in all but two of those a significant drop, I think, in terms of those reported offences. Does that also carry true for the comparison 22 to 23?
That's right. So during the lockdown years, what we did see is some artificial and quite significant reductions in a lot of crime groups. So we go back to pre-COVID to try and make some more accurate comparisons.
Okay, right. Okay, so just focusing on one of those issues, the rape and other serious sexual offences, which are up by 21.6%, and stalking, harassment plus 4. I'm not sure if that's actually a consequence of lockdown in terms of that. And has there been an increase in the number of offences which are actually charges being brought? Because, as you know, we have had concerns in the past here about the low level of those crimes which are being actually charged and getting to court. I think we're talking 10 to 12% on average. Yeah, so I mean, if we had an increase in the number of offences, are we getting an increase in the number of charges as well?
So in terms of increased reporting as a partnership through the Violence Against Women and Girls strategy, we've placed a lot of emphasis on encouraging victims to come forward and report rape and serious sexual offences. One of the concerns we had as a partnership is that there were some barriers preventing victims from feeling that level of confidence. And so an increase in reporting in many ways is seen as a positive, because we want to make sure that those access points are available. And we've worked as a partnership very, very closely with the third sector as well, in relation to ensuring that people who aren't maybe confident to report rape and sexual offences directly to police, they've got other ways of getting access to our services. The force have invested a great deal in Operation Soteria, which is a force-wide response to improving investigative standards to rape and serious sexual offences. So Within Swansea, we now have a rape investigation team that is dedicated to that area of work. So we invested a detective inspector, 4 detective sergeants and 24 detective constables specifically to look at rape and serious sexual offences. Well, I think that's a statement of intent from a policing point of view in terms of, you know, the investment into that resource. On a regional basis as well, the regional organised crime unit have invested a great deal in investigating online serious sexual offences. So we've seen a huge uptick in offences in that area, purely down to our proactive ability to find sexual offenders in the online space. So that's really significant as well. So we've got rape and serious sexual offence scrutiny panels that have been set up where, in conjunction with partners, we look at cases that have been to court, and whether the outcome is successful or not, it's about identifying lessons learned, best practice, ways of improving performance in the future. The HMIC-FRS have carried out an inspection of the force back in 2023. So during that inspection, they would have visited Swansea and noticed some really significant improvements. So the positive outcome rates or detections in old money for rape, back in 21, it was 3.3%, which is very low. We're now at 11%. And for serious sexual offences, again, an improvement, but very slight improvement from 9.1% to 9.7%, but improvement nonetheless. We're the highest performance area in Wales, and we're the second best performing force nationally. So, but still lots to do. And I think the conversations that Paul, Jane and myself have had from a safety partnership perspective is just really keeping on the momentum and the focus on making sure that victims feel confident to come forward and report. That's a key priority for us as a partnership.
I think that the fact that with 1 in 10 actually leading to detection and charging, we're amongst the best in the UK is a bit worrying for the rest of the UK, I have to say. I mean, as I understand it, one of the main obstacles to actually getting these offences in court is lack of confidence in the victim in terms of taking it all that way and the issues which they face, the barriers which they face in taking it forward. If there's more confidence in terms of reporting them, is that being reflected in more confidence among the victims in being actually getting it to court?
So we do a lot of follow-up work with victims, and I think in many cases victims do withdraw from the prosecution process halfway through, which is a real concern. And where possible, we work closely with the CPS and we pursue victimless prosecutions as far as we can. But evidently, it does become, very, very difficult, and the threshold that needs to be met for securing a successful conviction in court is clearly very high. But that journey, that victim experience is really important. So we've got lots of support workers within the force and in partner agencies who come together to bring that victim through that prosecution process, which can take up to 2 years in some cases. So you raise a very valid point. Getting someone into the custody suite and charged is just one small part of a very complex process.
Okay. Jane, did you want to add something?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks. Just to add, in terms of the third sector and our arrangements in terms of the wider partnership around Vawdr SV, is working with the one-stop shop in Swansea. In terms of this, we put a suite in there in terms of making it easier to give evidence and those kind of work. That still exists, but as Marcus said, it's really difficult. But loads of support workers from across all of our agencies, including working very closely with the third sector, and that victim experience so that we can make it better or make it easier to actually report and get a conviction as you go through on the line. But lots of work going on, lots of work still to do though.
Okay, thanks for that. Matthew, do you want to come into your question?
Thanks, Chair. And the statistics there now and the resources put into our last discussion there is obviously beneficial for that. But picking up on another one of the stats, there's been a 52% drop in burglary offences. So what do we attribute to that? And could you sort of explain, is there a difference between how we manage maybe a burglary in progress and maybe something that's happened and somebody's come back off holiday, or you know, they've been asleep and there's nobody at the property, then please.
Thank you. So a burglary in progress would generate an immediate 999 response. So that would typically be attended by uniformed officers in the first instance, quickly followed up by a detective response. We made a decision as a force that dwelling burglaries in particular do justify the oversight of an experienced trained detective due to the investigative opportunities that are available. But in the other scenario you described, where somebody comes home from holiday, for example, and it's a historic burglary, we will still routinely attend, and it will still receive a detective oversight, even if it's not an emergency. So I think having a monthly performance meeting within the force as well, or certainly locally within Swansea, that's dedicated just to look at dwelling burglary, is also really paid dividends, because it enables us to make sure that we are pursuing the right offenders, we are developing the right intelligence, and that we are, you know, working closely with our partners in relation to doing that crime prevention piece as well. So there's been a huge emphasis through the partnership in relation to coordinating leaflet drops, door-to-door campaigns, just to advise people around home security and things like that. A lot of money's been made available as well, so various funding streams. Just to give, in some circumstances, we will actually look to repair people's broken locks and repair windows, just to make sure homes are secure. We were very fortunate within the force as well to have a joint scientific investigation unit that is really one of the leading places in the UK for glass analysis. So where we've sent scenes of crime officers to burglary, and there are those forensic opportunities, things like glass analysis, fingerprints, there's a really good efficient system in place. So a lot of our detections have been born out of just a really good forensic capability, which we're very fortunate to have. So in 2020, we were detecting 7.5% of dwelling burglaries, and we're now detecting 17.3%, which is positive in Swansea. The force is in the top 3 nationally, which we're really proud of. But I think we're not resting on our laurels, even though we've clearly put some prolific burglars away in prison. It's only going to take 1 or 2 prison releases in the local community for that to very, very suddenly change. And some of these offenders will commit several dozen burglaries within a very short space of time. And it's not lost on us that the impact on victims is really, really significant. You know, the trauma and the long-lasting trauma is very clear. So even though it's dropped significantly, we're not going to take our eye off the ball, clearly, and it's still a force priority for us going forward.
Okay, then. Actually, just looking at these statistics, actually, one aspect that seems to be missing from this is car crime. I mean, is the one of these statistics for that, is that something which has been increasing? Swansea at one stage, but we talked about decades ago now, used to be known as the car crime centre in the UK. Hopefully we're not that anymore, but what's it look like in terms of car crime? Yeah.
So you're correct. There's no stats, and I can provide some context. I think we've seen a change, haven't we, from the scenes that we saw 20 years ago, and the way in which car crime was enabled now to something which is far more sophisticated and a lot more integrated into organised crime groups as well. So it's something which the force has been monitoring and responding to, particularly in the last 6 months. There is some geographical difference across the force in that regard. So working from east to west, so Cardiff sees the highest levels of theft of motor vehicles, followed by Middle Morgan, which is our neighbouring BCU, and then into Swansea. So what we're not seeing currently is a significant increase in organised criminality. Our biggest issue in Swansea is the theft of motorcycles, which continues to be a real issue for people living in our communities who can't bring their motorbikes to work without fear of it being stolen. So we have a team called the Territorial Crime Team, who are you may have seen in the media last week of the footage of Mumbles Road. That was our Territorial Crime Team, so highly skilled police officers who are able to use a range of tactics which are difficult and challenging particularly around motorcycles, for us to be able to start being more proactive in that regard to try and tackle some of the offences around auto crime. But if we flip that to theft from motor vehicle, that's seen a significant reduction across the force in the last few years. And when we look at some of the other crime types in there, they're probably being replaced by other crimes, things like shoplifting, where we've seen a significant increase in that particular offence type. And then obviously the movement of some crimes onto the online space as well, which gives that degree of anonymity. I can never say that word.
Okay. Thank you. Just those who want to come in on other questions, I'm going to go through the list of questions in the pre-meeting before we go on to other questions around, okay? So still on this table, mental health. There's been a lot of publicity nationally about what's happening in terms of police response to mental health issues. And I noticed in this mental health issues down by 17.8%. What is the local police's approach to mental health issues now? Are you standing back from that, or are you still getting involved as ever? Do you have is there still a service response to that?
Okay, thanks, Chair. So our response to it is, we triage all calls which come into our control room in Bridgend, and then we make a decision as to whether or not it's something which we need to deploy to. If there's an immediate threat to life, then we will always deploy to those incidents, even though we may not be the best agency to resolve it. We can go there and reduce some of the threat and risk around it and let other agencies step in behind us when it's safe to do so. In some cases, we may well signpost to other agencies. So up until 2 years ago, we used to have mental health professionals in our control room who helped us to deal with some of that incoming demand. That's changed now, so that's gone onto a telephone service as part of the wider health board approach across the 3 health boards which sit within the force area. So that's 111 option 2. Which allows people to direct their needs straight into mental health services, which would hopefully result in better outcomes. The stats which are on the document which you've been provided with relate to what we call Section 136 Mental Health Act powers. So that is when we exercise our powers to remove people to a place of safety because we have such a high level of concern that people are not capable of looking after themselves, taken to a place of safety, which primarily should be a mental health unit or A&E. In some cases, it's police custody, which isn't the best place necessarily for that. So our reduction in that is part of our effort to make sure that, 1, we're using it appropriately, 2, that we exhaust all other avenues of support services to be able to intervene so that we don't have to use our policing powers, because often in mental health, we are probably not the right agency to be involved, and people in crisis probably do not want to see people turning up in a police van and loads of kit and equipment, which is probably in some cases aggravating that. We are working to reference the national work ongoing. We're working through a programme of work called Right Care, Right Person, which we've been actively engaging with members and members of the local authority as well, from social services across to the leader who's had some significant involvement in it as well, which is a graduated response to changing the way that we deal with it. That is absolutely not us stepping away from the critical end of mental health. That mental health part of it is due to go live in February next year. We will always respond to the critical need to it. What we're seeking to do is to make sure that we connect people with the right services as early as possible to improve outcomes. So next year, hopefully when we get an invite back, we can give an update as to how that is going, how that is improving outcomes, what the wider impacts of that are. But there will be a number of wider briefings going into local authority and members as we progress through the year, so that everybody's fully sighted on it, because it will have an impact on people in your local communities as well, hopefully a positive one. But it's also important that you've got a feedback loop into us as well to make sure that if there are people who you see in your communities who are suffering, potentially because of the changes that we've made, that we're able to consider and respond to that in a positive way.
Okay, is that legislation you just quoted the UK Act or the Welsh Act?
The Mental Health Act is UK legislation.
Because there's also a Pacific Welsh Act as well, isn't there?
So we use the UK legislation because it is policing's non-devolved, isn't it? So we're still abiding by legislation set by Westminster.
But there are still duties for the police in the Welsh
Yes.
Mental Health Act, aren't
Yes,
there?
but our powers,
The
our
powers are from
execution
that,
of those powers to
yeah,
detain
yeah.
people is
Yeah.
preserved within Home Office Westminster government.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, Councillor Lyndon Jones.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, thanks for the work you do. And I know I get great support from the police covering my ward, Simon and Andrew. However, I have some concerns about the implications on the local crime and disorder on that, about the cuts to the PCSO budgets and workforce in Wales, given the work they do in communities and to support neighbourhood policing, not least going into schools as well. And grateful if you could say how this is being affected and how you're going to reallocate the PCSOs to get better cover.
Okay, thank you, sir. It's a really good question, and we share your concerns. You know, they're a very valuable resource to us here in Swansea, Neath and Port Talbot. So we are fortunate enough to have 130 PCSOs working in our local area, and they deliver, you know, predominantly neighbourhood policing, but they're also embedded within the community safety partnership team as well. And the service they provide to the community and the feedback we get is absolutely fantastic. And if we were to lose that resource, we would be extremely worried about the future of neighbourhood policing. But what we are working through at the moment, as a force-wide response to that, we're looking at the sort of deprivation data and the crime data for each ward, and we're trying to work out, well, worst case scenario, what would it look like if we lost, you know, X number of PCSOs? Could we carry on as business as usual? So I think that the cuts to the PCSO numbers for us here in Swansea are going to be quite modest and much less impactful than we initially feared. So we're just working through that data with our headquarters colleagues at the moment. The word redundancy has certainly not been mentioned. So we've had quite a few PCSOs approach us as a senior management team recently, just expressing concern about their personal future. So redundancy is definitely not on the cards. But I think over the course of the next 18 months, we will lose a small number of PCSOs because they're either leaving the organisation anyway or they want to become full-time police officers. It's going to be a little bit harder for us to get those replaced. But what we're keen to do is to make sure that there's good visibility, sustainable visibility on each of the wards in Swansea. That's certainly not within our plans to remove that cover. In relation to the schools aspect, that's another concern that we've got. I'm just going to hand over to my colleague, Chief Inspector Ratty, just to talk through that, because James is the force lead for the schools programme, so he's got a really good insight into that part of it.
Okay, thank you, sir. So, like my colleague said, I'm the force lead and have been for a few years. There's one of me in each force, and we deliver an all Wales schools programme across the 4 Welsh forces. So it's a national curriculum. So we are governed by Welsh Government around what we deliver, albeit there is some scope to deal with local issues in local schools, etc. So it's been in being for the best part of 20 years. As you know, the funding has been removed. We've got 25 schools police officers across the force. Within our BCU, we've got 8, and I think 5 of those service the schools in the Swansea area. So they are particularly busy in the comprehensives and the pupil referral units, and they also have a lot of involvement in the primary schools as well. So at the moment, there's conversations taking place as to what that will look like going forward. The Welsh Government funding finishes at the end of well, it's finished. It finished, sorry, at the end of the last financial year. But South Wales Police has given an undertaking that we will keep those people in post till the end of the academic year. So the conversations are going on at the moment around what the schools programme will look like for us in September. We are having conversations with the other Welsh forces to try and get some consistency. So we do deliver the same thing, but notwithstanding that, it's also an opportunity for South Wales Police to shape exactly what we want for local areas. So if we need something specific in Swansea, we'll deliver that something specific in Swansea. So we'll ultimately devise our own curriculum, and we'll certainly engage with the Safer Swansea Partnership and other partners around what that will look like. but ultimately we're shaping what it will look like in terms of staffing numbers as well. We're hopeful that those 8 officers across the BCU, the 5 in Swansea, will remain in post and will continue to deliver something not too dissimilar, hopefully, from what we've had in the past. But those, like I say, those conversations are going on at the moment.
Lyndon, you happy?
Yeah, I was only going to say, obviously, with the PCSOs, they've built up a lot of local knowledge, and to lose that is quite significant.
Okay. Right, so Wendy, Councillor Wendy Lewis.
Thanks, Chair. My question is about the relationship between neighbourhood policing 101 and 999. Feedback from councillors suggests some concern around the connectivity between these and councillors not being kept in the loop on issues affecting their areas and residents. There's also concern that there are reporting gaps between each service, leading to some issues not being investigated. Could you comment on this?
So thanks for the question. I should probably have said before I started that I was previously in my last role responsible for our force control room and was there for a period of 3 years. So the first thing I'd like to do is just set some context around where we were and where we've got to, because I don't think I've been to an external meeting yet where people haven't commented on the 101 service and the challenges around getting us to answer the phone and how long you have to wait for as well. So over the last 3 years, we've significantly improved from where we were before. So 3 years ago, we were losing about 30% of our calls coming into the control room because we just didn't have the capacity to deal with it, which would have had a significant impact on public confidence, significant impact on yourselves as well in terms of frustrations about being able to get through to us. As of today, so for this month, we're answering nearly 92% of our calls, and the average wait time now is somewhere around about 2.5 minutes. We've also introduced live chat as well, so people can report things online and have an online conversation as a different way of contacting us as well. So the 999 service and the 101 service is the same thing. So they're the same people in the same room and they answer different calls. We take anywhere between 2,000 and 2,500 calls every day. We don't allocate all of those out across the force, so we will risk assess every call that comes in. We will make a record of it, and then we will make a decision in the control room as to whether we have an immediate response to it, a priority response that's within an hour, scheduled response within 8 hours, or a 48-hour response, or no response. So there's 5 different grades of calls. So when we decide not to deploy to something, what should happen is that information which is recorded in the control room gets fed down then into local neighbour policing teams if it's a neighbourhood issue. So if it is a piece of intelligence or information, that should flow into neighbourhood policing teams for them to review, make contact if they think that they need to, and to look at it and see whether is it an isolated incident, is it part of a wider pattern of issues within a local community that we need to respond to. That doesn't always work in the way in which we would want and expect it to. So a couple of things from me around that is if you've got examples, let us know and we can look into those, because it works. It does work because I've seen it in action in Pontardawe just over the last couple of days where we've had a bit of information, we responded to it, we've uncovered a cannabis factory. So I'm confident that it works. It needs to work all of the time. There is an offer there as well, Chair. So in other scrutiny panels similar to this across the force area, there's been an offer for the scrutiny panel members to come to the control room if you've not been there before, so you can see how it works in practice, so you can see in your mind how it might work. So when you ring in, what does it look like? What do we do? What do the staff do? And then importantly, then what's the process which leads from Bridgend, where the call goes to it landing back in your local community with your local PCS or whoever else might be there. So there's an open offer to the panel, which I'd be happy to arrange with colleagues up in the control room to help that. But the message really and the response is we're getting better. We've got more to do around it, but please feed through any specific examples where you think that we've not met the expectations that you were given at the time when you called to us, and we can look into those on an individual basis.
And the UK?
Oh, I forgot to sort of answered. I can't go into details here, but sort of, it's not 100%.
Yeah, I think it's about maybe 5, maybe 10 years since I was last at the centre in Bridgend. So maybe we'll organise a field trip at some stage to go and have a look at it ourselves. But when I went there, very much operated like a call centre when I was there. So you know, yeah. Yeah, sure, of course.
If there are any blockages in that flow of intelligence from yourselves into the control room through to the neighbourhood policing teams, you know, it's really important that we try and identify how that's happening. So perhaps I'll share my contact details with you, and when you've had a chance, if you just give, as the chief says, just a couple of examples, and I can look into how potentially that is happening. Yeah.
I think one of the frustrations I find with 101 is people will contact me or put it on Facebook, and they won't actually ring, even though you say ring 101, you know, or contact 101. Oh, I don't want to see the phone. And I find if you email, we get a response very quickly. So we do our best to. I think we all do our best to encourage people to go to 101, but often they won't do that, and that, of course, has impact on how you deploy your resources. We understand that, Matthew.
Yeah, can I just pick up on that? I think like the different ways you can report stuff now is a game changer as well, like live chat online via Messenger and stuff like that. And I don't know who's in charge of your social media page on Facebook, but they are bringing a sort of a lighter touch to policing as well when it comes to answering queries and stuff like that as well. You know, because you know, you guys and girls do a fantastic job in really difficult circumstances with less resource now probably than you've ever had. So, you know, from my ward perspective anyway, we can't speak highly enough of the police. And I know it's not a critical thing we're having here today, because I think we're all on the same page as well. But yeah, the different ways to report, not just stuck on the phone for however long, it's via Messenger. So yeah, it's anything like that, and you engage more with the younger element as well.
Okay, right. We've gone through our pre-prepared question. Cyril, I'm prepared to drop the Chinese wall between the scrutiny and executive. As I assume you've got a ward matter you want to raise.
Yeah, it's just on page 13 of the report. It's nice to see that some of the crimes are down: primary arrests, violence with injury. They're on the downward slope. Can I ask about the rape and other serious sexual offences and stalking, harassment? Is that a sudden influx, or is it a case of people were afraid to report it because of the stigma of being raped?
So I think there are probably a number of factors in that, and it's important we lump in together an awful lot of different offences into stalking and harassment, some of which ranges from disputes on Facebook up to those most serious and critical high harm incidents of domestic violence related stalking and installing cameras in partners' homes. I think the national conversation, particularly around violence against women and girls, and particularly around stalking and harassment, particularly some of the high profile rape and serious sexual offences, is driving an increase in reporting. I think, and that is current day and historical matters as well. So it's a range of different things. I think the reassurance I can give, around particularly the rape element of it is every incident of rape reported to us is serious and significant, whether that is a street-based crime, whether that is behind closed doors. Those offences which happen in public, so those stranger rape type scenarios, which we see thankfully small numbers of, are generally the ones where we will detect and find the offenders for those. So that wider community harm which is created by that and that fear are those offences where clearly our detection opportunities with those are our primary focus. I don't see it changing. I think it's on an upward trajectory across the force and nationally. The challenge for us is to be able to give a narrative which reassures people that it isn't just the highest harm. There are things in there which probably, on reflection, probably are not a police matters. So those disputes on Facebook where you've got a choice to block somebody if you wanted to stop the problem in its tracks, which are just general disputes, are probably things which we would rather spend our time dealing on the more serious matters which are causing significant harm to people in the local community. On a positive note, Councillor Anderson, at the moment, Town Hill sector is the only one which is seeing a general reduction in crime overall. We didn't pre-arrange that, Chair.
Well, I'm in Town Hill sector as well, and I'm in Town Hill sector as well. And I have to say, you have a very good inspector base there. We're both doing a really good job.
Yes.
So yeah,
With
you okay, Cyril? Yeah. Well, okay.
The inspector and Jordan have been
Yeah.
brilliant officers.
Yeah.
So let us lose up first.
Okay, and as Cyril didn't raise Town Hill and Mayhill, I will, because I know you've got a section at the end of the report on that.
Yeah.
And my understanding, what the issues around the riot was around deployment of resources to try and nip it into the bud as early as possible. So I'm just wondering, there's a lot of information here about that. I mean, if you were ever to get an ongoing situation like that, are you now confident that you'll be able to deploy resources from across the South Wales area fast enough to be able to nip any issue like that in the bud, not let it carry on for the number of hours which it did carry on when it happened in Mayhill?
So another declaration of interest. In my previous role, I also had some command responsibility in the days after Mayhill, and then the subsequent inquiries which took place after that. So we've had a number of testing incidents since Mayhill, none more so than the events that we saw in Ely last year following the tragic death of the two young lads, which is clearly still being investigated at the moment. That gave us some good operational reassurance around our ability to react, mobilise, set up command structures, send people forward, deal with the disorder which we saw in Ely head on. And there have been other incidents where we've mobilised public order resources, particularly for unlicensed music events, which we've seen in various areas across the force as well. So the operational deployment of it, we're satisfied but not complacent, because clearly we need to maintain that if we had another incident in Mayhill or anywhere else in the force, that we are far better prepared to be able to respond in the way that we would want to, but importantly in the way that the community would expect us to as well. As I said, we're not complacent in that regard, and there are a number of communities across South Wales where we're still working really, really hard to make sure that we manage tensions. And as Councillor Anderson has said, when I first arrived and I went up to the Phoenix Centre and met Councillor Anderson and Leanne and other key people up there, the community's learned an awful lot. We've learned an awful lot about what happened in Mayhill as well. So I'm confident that we're in a much better place, and hopefully the report provides you with some reassurance around the number of recommendations across a number of key thematic areas that, following the public apology that the force made after the initial inquiry, that we are in a much better place, which should reassure yourselves and the local community as well that we can respond to that in an effective way.
Okay, thanks. Beth, you've got a question.
Yeah, it's not about Mayhill, so I don't know if...
No, that's fine. Carry on. Yeah.
Okay. So I was just going to ask about priority 4 around reducing offending and drivers of crime, and point 1 is about sort of mental health treatment. So I just wondered if there's sort of challenges with the NHS with waiting times and sort of how the partnership works closely with the NHS on this one.
Any takers? Rob, you want? Sorry. Rob.
Yeah, perhaps apologies, Chair, I was at a funeral, which is why I'm late out, but I have been listening online. In terms of the challenge around mental health and links to things like drugs exploitation, because all of these problems often pop up in the response that we have to give to certain residents. I think that the point being is that there's a drugs commission piece of work going on at the moment, and part of that is due to report back to us, to the police and to the health board early in the summer of this year, and that will address some of the issues that has been highlighted in the question in terms of, well, if you have a person with specific needs, how do you ensure that the appropriate agency steps forward quickly to provide the sort of support that they would need? Now, depending on the circumstances, that might be police support, it might be social care support or other support from the local authority, or it could be mental health support. We acknowledge at the present time that that hasn't been happening to the degree that we would like in all cases. And that's why the Drugs Commission work is sitting down with people who've been through that system and can give a view from people actually in the system to help us design the sort of response we would want to see that we hope would be effective. And that reads across to the response I know Chris gave earlier in terms of the right person, right care. And again, been engaging with police colleagues on that around making sure that if the police are going to change the way in which they respond to some certain aspects of crime or need, that the other organisations that may need to step in are very clear, so that we don't end up creating a gap where nobody steps in. And I think that's part of the work that's ongoing at the moment. Is often when you see a failure in the system, it's because the agencies, all of the partners haven't worked together effectively, haven't been well connected enough. I think we've got really good relationships and really good structures at the moment, but there's always room for improvement, and that's the work that's going on at the moment. So again, I'm sure if the Health Board were here, they would be saying something very similar. But I think the Drugs Commission work is going to be a challenging piece of work with some challenging recommendations, and it's up to all of us then to step up and address those. So hopefully that's helpful, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Robert. Alison?
Yeah, I suppose following on from what the leader said, I was going to talk about the Drug Use Commission that I sit on, and I also sit on the Poverty Truth Commission. And I suppose, you know, as you can all imagine, mental health has come across hugely in both areas. It doesn't matter, you know, who we talk to. It really is a massive problem out there. You know, the Health Board does sit on the poverty, on the Save Swansea partnership, and obviously we all try to work closely together. And like the leader said, both commissions are now coming to an end, and the reports will come back, and you know, hopefully that will encourage or, you know, guide people in a way that we need to step up to things. So we look forward really to the recommendations coming out of the reports.
Thank you, Alison. Hopefully those reports will come to a scrutiny committee so we can have a look at those as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Wendy?
I'm not trying to steal a line, Mike, honestly, it's not for you. Maybe ask the leader. Can you tell us what work is going on with all the agencies to deal with the issues on High Street?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Lewis. Yeah, I mean, members may have seen some reports over the weekend in the local press around High Street. I was very disappointed with the standard of reporting that had gone on in that article. It was largely full of historical issues. Wanted to make it clear that if you've seen comments from me in that article, they are not recent comments. They are ones that are well out of date. And I think also contributions that were printed from Safer Swansea Partnership and elsewhere were also well out of date. I think it was, I don't usually turn around and criticise journalists per se, but this was very poor journalism. The council were not contacted for comment on those issues. And I'm not sure if the police were, but certainly the council wasn't. And given that we're here talking about a range of services that are there to support people in difficulties, like where they have substance misuse or drug misuse, where they're at risk of sexual exploitation, you would have thought that the journalists would have taken the opportunity to contact the service providers to take account of what is actually going on. So I thought might take the opportunity, given that Councillor Lewis asked the question. Some of the stuff that's gone on in the moment, members will already know significant investment in new buildings and jobs in High Street. That's well documented, over 100 million going in. But it's not about buildings, it's about what we do to support the people who live there and the people who may have challenges. We know through the work we've done with police colleagues and others on county lines that it's an end-of-line station that we're there, so it's inevitably going to attract some elements of crime around that, as all stations do, and all cities have challenges with drugs and sexual exploitation. But we've been working in terms of our third sector partners, Barrett, Women's Aid, Community Cohesion, Community Safety, Evolve, all have been extremely active over the last 7 to 10 years in that area. And the evidence is quite dramatic in terms of what we're seeing in terms of how High Street is. It's not to say that there are no problems there, but it's a certainly much improved environment. In terms of our rangers, that we've extended the areas around there for patrols, again, working with police colleagues to make sure that the presence is there so that people can actually report when they need to. There is support there for women and those who are potentially at risk of exploitation in that area from drugs gangs and others, to make sure that they are supported and that we are there to provide them with safe refuse and safe support. In addition to that, there are initiatives around making sure that people have protection for their properties if that's required. We've invested over £1 million in new CCTV, which is going live there as well to assist with crime detection and prevention. And obviously, there is a significant amount of investment going in the housing in that area in terms of the blocks that are being refurbished. Much of that was ignored in the article. And I think it's a real shame when the effort and the work that's being put in by partners around this table, by the multiple third sector and voluntary agencies, is ignored by press who should know better. Their job is not to talk down the city, and their job is not to represent views that are out of date and rerun stories from 7 years ago. So, I wanted to take the opportunity. Thank you, Chair, for giving me a bit of brevity to do that, because I am very proud of the effort that's going in from all of the partners. We have challenges, as every city does. We have difficulties and people who need extreme amounts of support. And that's what we're about, is helping people out of exploitation, out of the crime and drug circle, and trying to get them back into useful, productive lives. So thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any more questions at all? Oh, Sam.
Thank you, Peter. The first thing I just say as a comment before my question is just, I think many of us as councillors over the last few months have found the regular sessions with the police really helpful. And I know that it's one thing that I will keep flagging up and I will keep saying is brilliant, because when I was first elected, we didn't have that. And I think that regular time and regular contact with police officers has been invaluable. I'm sure all of us as councillors would agree that that is a really positive step forward. And that's been really helpful, and has also increased the speed of in which councillors can report crimes. It's made it easier to chase up and to follow up. It's made it easier to get reports back. So I just want to say that in terms of the communication between local councillors who are embedded in their communities and the police force, that communication has been massively improved over the past few months. So I just want to say thank you for that, and long may it continue. My question was around priority 2. Which is tackling hate crime and community tensions. And we've had a little incident of this in my ward over the past few months. But my main question was just asking really for if you could elaborate in terms of, it can often be incredibly difficult when you're dealing with issues of hate crime to engage with various communities and various groups. And just looking through the report you've prepared, it lists many, the Hate Crime Week, the Islamophobia Awareness Month and things like that, which I fully support, but the numbers that engaged with it are quite low. And so I'm just wondering, how do we, as partners, seek to grow that community cohesion and engage in a better way? The other question I'd have is, in terms of the figures around hate crimes, my assumption, my working assumption would be that the reality of hate crime is much larger, but it is a huge area of underreporting. And I suppose my question really is an ongoing one that we'll continue to work through, but it's how can we continue to provide confidence to some of the most vulnerable in our communities that we are there to safeguard and protect them and keep them safe, and that they can come forward to us. So I just wondered if you could speak around that. Thank you.
I'll take some of that, Chair. It's difficult, but that's not to say that we're frightened of that challenge. Picking up on some of the conversations from earlier, we are very aware that there is underreporting from certain communities, and we have just started a project on St Helens Road, working with University World Trinity St David's, as well as my community cohesion team and local policing, to try and understand what the barriers are to reporting, because we know that not just that community, but other communities are affected by a lot of the conversations that we are talking about here, yet that does not reflect in the figures when we come to provide support for those communities. I think there's a language barrier issue. I think there's also a trust issue. Some of these people have come from countries where they don't recognise support from local policing or local councillors or council officers. So it's about how we approach that and change that mindset. So there's a lot of work that's going on at this moment in time, which is following up on a project that was funded by the Arts Council. But like any project, there's a start and finish and the funding stops. However, there are significant questions that remain unanswered, which is what we as a partnership have identified and picked up on, to say that, you know, there are concerns within a community here. So what are we going to do about it? So hopefully over the coming months, we can develop that, work with strong voices within the community who can help us take that forward. And it will be great that you know, this time next year we'll be able to report on that. With regard to hate and particularly hate language, we do a significant amount of work with Evolve and schools. And in fact, we're about to deliver a significant engagement event up at Clays Primary School, having invested probably 2 months of significant work with not just young people, but families. And members of my team have actually been to the school and done work within the classroom about challenging some of the language that's being used by young people. It's clearly coming from somewhere, be it a home environment, be it online, be it within peer groups. So a lot of work has been done there. We've worked from the outset on a project called Flip the Streets, which works with communities in challenging some of the language and some of the graffiti that we're seeing in Swansea. And those conversations are all about challenging that language, in particular the issues we have at the moment about those that aspire to be the next Andrew Tate, and the hate that has with it, particularly against young women. So Flip the Streets has been really successful because it's enabled young people to have those conversations in a safe space, but also then to, through the lens of art, design, artwork that challenges that language and that hate, and it's been really successful. Sadly, the one that in particular in the city centre, which was around misogyny and challenging that from 6 young lads who clearly had different views about young people, that has been targeted twice now. But the message actually that's been painted over it, clearly they don't understand what the original message of the artwork was. So there's a lot of work that we're involved in. Some of that is now going to be taken forward to intergenerational, because I think some of this is learnt from the family. So we need to challenge that and not shy away from it. You know, we were working with some young people that one of their comments was they want to be a gangster because they know a mate who's got a gun in a car. Well, you know, we need to try and change that. It's not easy, but one of the key areas that we are focusing on is about trying to enable people to report when they feel concerned about issues that are affecting them or their communities.
Thank you, Paul. And I think the Flip the Streets project in Manston Community Centre is absolutely excellent. I saw that it was actually ongoing, and it's, you know, the young people who took part in that, you know, absolutely brilliant. So, Alison, you want to come in?
Yeah, and not to repeat what Paul said, you know, just to sort of, Richard, you know, the communication team, you know, very small team, but what they do well is, you know, really work in partnership across the city. They work very closely with those schools and certainly all the third sector and the police, because you can't tackle these situations alone. You know, Sam's area, as he was talking about, I don't know if you have, but you're certainly on the list to be involved. Sam, sorry, to this day they were pulling it together because there's like you know, there's been a lot of work in your area because the language that was being used was old language. It wasn't something that young children would necessarily know if they hadn't heard it from adults, sort of thing, you know. And we've had awful experiences with East lately, and I congratulate, you know, say thank you to our police force here because they were absolutely outstanding compared to our neighbouring police force that you know, didn't respond anywhere near as well. You know, so we've got a lot of little small grants available as well that the team put out, and we use, you know, our colleagues from within the local authority, like Helen Clancy, who knows everybody out there, to as well as people that work and live in the communities. And those little grants are helping bring new organizations on board and new people so that we try and spread. But it is a slow process, and people don't always trust, and all these things take time, but bit by bit. But it's all I can say is very much a partnership to overcome these challenges because they're very complex.
Right. I want to ask which one of the two neighbouring forces you're comparing us to, so we'll move on. Yeah, exactly. Well, there's four altogether, but only two neighbouring ones. I've got Chris and then Adam. Chris.
Thank you, Chair. It's good to hear some of the things that you've been saying, but what you haven't spoke about is a bit of the elephant in the room, and that is a lot of these problems that we talk about are caused by drugs, and the selling of drugs, and the transportation of drugs, and what have you. The intelligence networks, I know that you have, and people are fed into them. Can I ask, do you really think that you've now got a handle on the drug issue? Because there are parts of Swansea where you don't have, you can just walk around and everybody, you can smell cannabis in the air. You don't even have to go into buildings. And it's not just not cannabis, it's other things as well. And I would ask, you know, for your honest opinions about where are we in this never-ending war with drugs. Are we in a position where we can say, yes, we got a handle on it and we're dealing with it, or has it just become so big that we're going to have some national event to actually take it over?
Thank you. So I'm the force lead for substance use. So I've had the opportunity to work really closely with my counterparts in another part of this force, but also nationally, to get a really good understanding of the various trends. And I think it's a very, very volatile drugs market that's impacting Swansea at the moment, in that it fluctuates virtually from 1 month to the next. So your description of the availability of drugs is very, very accurate. I'd go a step further and say that internationally there are trends in relation to things like synthetic opioids that are, you know, we thought wouldn't touch us, but now are. You know, we've had some confirmed deaths, unfortunately, within Wales in relation to synthetic drugs like nitazines. So, you know, we do keep abreast of those trends now that are going to impact on the city. We are very fortunate within Swansea to have an organised crime team that is, I don't mean to sound crass when I say this, but they are punching well above their weight in terms of their ability to dismantle organised county line gangs from Birmingham, London, Liverpool. You know, all of those locations do impact on our city in a big way. And I say they're punching above their weight because it's a modest investment of resource that we've made, but the success rate is huge. And what's really pleasing to see is that when we do manage to put people in prison as a result of supplying drugs in Swansea, we use tactics to reach out to the users of those county lines to say, look, you know, we're not looking to prosecute you as users, but you need to really address your substance use problem. And having spoken to some of the service providers in the area, we started to see people take up those services, which is really good. But as long as there's an open customer base for drugs, we will continue to see a presence of organised crime in Swansea, and that is the reality which I think you've described. I have ongoing meetings with the substance misuse portfolio in Welsh Government to look at innovative ways of trying to get to the root cause of some of these problems. And I think it's about trying to stem the flow of drugs, trying to prevent people from accessing drugs in the first place. That for me is the challenge. And I think the leader spoke earlier on about that whole system approach, where we really get to the heart of why people are using drugs in the first place. I think without that investment, we're going to be going around in a vicious circle. But as long as there's a drugs market in Swansea, I say the royal we, that it's the chief's decision to invest the resources in this area. We've got to keep enforcing, and we've got to keep dismantling those county lines, and it will be a relentless battle, but one that we'll continue with. But I think that visible police presence as well, particularly in the city centre, and you've all had the pack on Operation Viscaria, that is our way of just reassuring people, but really getting into people's faces as well. If they're selling drugs in the city centre, they will be stopped, they will be searched, and they will be prosecuted. There's no doubt about that. So we will be really robust on dealers, but I think we've got to be preventative with users, and we've got to find a way of supporting them as much as we can.
Paul? Yeah, just to expand on that as well, the Serious Organised Crime Partnership is in a far better place now than it was probably 18 months ago. I sit on that along with colleagues from across not just the local authority, but there are other agencies. Sometimes you always hear people putting up a barrier about sharing information. I don't think I've sat in one meeting there where people haven't come forward with information, and that has enabled the police to undertake the job that they do, which is the disruption and then the enforcement. But just to assure, the committee here is that there's been a lot of intelligence that's come from trading standards, licensing, but more importantly about the safeguarding support that's put in place from CMIT about the extra familial harm, because it's not just about the dealers and the users, it's the impact it's having on siblings and the wider family. The conversations there are open and honest, but for me, what is encouraging is it's a meeting that has outcomes and actions that are dealt with. We don't live in a perfect world, but I believe that we're in definitely a better place here in dealing with some of the real challenges that we all face. It's not just about the police, it's about what is happening within our communities and the impact the drugs are having, both from the fact that people seem to think it's good to have all of the money from the buying and selling of it, but more importantly, from our point of view, it's the harm it's causing.
I totally agree with you. I don't necessarily think. I think the biggest problem is if you see a young kid on a new motorbike and his siblings or his contemporaries understand that he's had it from selling drugs, there is a huge pressure on him to get involved as well. We know that it's being used. Younger people are being used on bikes, on push bikes, motorbikes, whatever, and in cars to traffic them around. And it's just it's reassurance from all of the police, from all the agencies, that you are dealing with it. Because in many circumstances throughout the city, you will hear people saying, well, they just sell it on the corner over there, nobody's bothering with them. And excuse me, and it's that gets to people like, I know, elected members. They feel, hang on a minute, we know that the police are doing it, but it's never advertised. It's not advertised, and that really is the issue. And I think if you do that, then you will then begin to see a greater support from the public, because that's what you need. That's what you need, is the public. And the way to stem the growth in drugs is through education, and to tell kids just how bad it gets. You know, and I think that's one of the way forward. But I think you really now need to start advertising the fact that you're pulling these people in, and the data goes on about our daily newspaper. You know, all right, it's not the best in the world, but we really need to use that and social media to tell people what you are doing and what other agencies are doing, because they need to know.
I think, and to add to that, I think it's the fact that we're doing it in partnership as well is really important. And just going back to the point that I think it's Sam, sorry, I think it said earlier on about, you know, the gratitude for yourselves being involved in the police meetings. I get that feedback as well. So I've been doing the role since November, and I do put a lot of pressure on the neighbourhood inspectors to develop that problem solving and develop the intelligence around drugs and other matters. And the support you as councillors provide to that work is absolutely fantastic. And I know a lot of the initiatives that have been developed wouldn't have been possible without your contribution. So thank you. But yes, I've had those conversations with our media team about celebrating our success a bit more. And I think as a partnership, it's something that Jane and I can have another look at as well.
Yeah. I think one of the issues with in terms of involving councillors in the community is that when you report potential dealing, you've got an intelligence gathering function there, so you don't always get immediate feedback, and sometimes you don't get any feedback at all, because the run-in between the reporting of the action and the actual arrest or whatever can take some time. And I think that is part of the problem, I think, of that. But of course, the other issue is the link between drug use and acquisitive crime, and that, of course, affects all of us. So, you know, I think, obviously, thank you for what you're doing, and I think it's very important that we do try to get on top of that. And we look forward to the report which the leaders referred to, so we can see how we're going to get a multi-agency approach to do things on that. I'm going to bring Adam in next. Oh, sorry, Hayley, do you want to comment as a cabinet member?
Yes, sorry, I just wanted to comment really as well. You mentioned a partnership approach, and I know that drug usage leads to criminal activity, but I know from previous work history, as well as my role now, is that when somebody does commit a crime and then they are arrested and subsequently sent to prison, they actually get a much faster treatment in relation to their drug use than they do in communities. And sometimes they purposely commit an offence because they know they're going to have access to that treatment at a much quicker rate, which really isn't helpful. And I know we rely on our third sector partners to try and keep people motivated, because when they present sometimes as saying, you know, I need help, I want to tackle my drug use, they're not always given that support from whether it's our health colleagues and third sector try to keep them motivated, but it's very difficult when services kind of don't tend to meet people where they are at the times that they need that support as well. So, you know, there are lots of things that need to happen, but I know from a police perspective, when somebody is arrested, they do tend to get the support that they need, or the prescription that they require at that point in time, which is sad.
It's a really good point. And then I think the other risk period for those individuals is when they get released from prison, because often then that support is suddenly gone and they're out in the community. And unless that intervention is fast enough, we did have a drug-related death in Swansea 2 weeks ago where somebody had been released from prison 3 days before. And those are the tragic cases where people just fall off the edge. And so going back, that whole system needs to work properly. The other thing I forgot to mention is we've had the luxury of ADA funding in Swansea for the last few years from the Home Office. We're now into the last year of ADA. So our intention is to really maximise the impact of that funding in this last year, and what it's going to look like beyond 2025, we just don't know. I'd like to see ADA continue, but I think all of the ADA sites across the UK are really concerned, and we've got this far. Let's not stop the momentum now. So we do have colleagues working on the ADA team who are campaigning with the Home Office to try and look at getting it extended if possible.
I was going to say, if a user has to get arrested to get treatment, that's a political failure in terms of the service delivery, which needs to be addressed. And I think has been raised many, many times at the Welsh level as well. Adam, you had a question.
Yeah, just very quickly, just to say thank you for all the work that's been done by all the partners. I know it's mentioned in the report, Flip the Streets in Gysainen. It's not my ward, but my ward's adjacent, so a lot of the issues are basically the same issues. And I think it's an example where residents, sort of young and older, felt listened to, and their instances and their concerns have been sort of responded to, and the response has been taken forward, bearing that in mind. So I just wanted to say thank you to all of you for that, because I feel like that's a work in progress that I feel like I've got a lot of confidence in. So just to say thank you for that. Just to pivot back to hate crime, appreciate that you've been answering questions for a very long time, but just to sort of quickly hone in on just two instances. On page 10, I think page 21 of the agenda, it says that hate crime has increased by just over 11%, largely because of foreign affairs, things that have been driving that. And then on the next page, you talk about seeking to increase prevent referrals through education and training. And I know you've touched on some of the issues in your previous answers, but firstly, are you anticipating that prevent referrals will be increasing because you anticipate a rise in instances where they need to, or it's because you think there are instances now where maybe there are people who need to be referred that aren't getting there, or a bit of both? And secondly, just another question. I appreciate that you've identified a load of in your small steps sort of program where you're engaging with partners about far right awareness on how the far right politics is sort of spreading through. One of the things I didn't see in it was sort of businesses and things that sort of maybe the far right have historically tried to tiptoe into. For example, businesses like tattoo artists, or anywhere that's got like a meeting space or anything like that, where they can maybe sort of find like a friendly face, and before you know it, they've turned a meeting space that wasn't a far right meeting space into a far right meeting space. Is there scope for engaging with businesses that might be susceptible to being targeted, but like that, sort of subtly or otherwise, in your sort of collaborative approach to countering far right terrorism and extremism? Thank you.
Yeah, Paul, go on.
Okay. This is my world, and I've been in it a very, very long time. So I could share some wonderful footage of an individual who used the space in the Railway Tavern many years ago, Nick Griffin. We're well aware of how they operate. In the old days, it was very easy to understand and manage, because it tended to be people who got together, drank too much, fought, and were very open then in about what they were intending to do. It's now moved very much to the online space, which makes the disruption more difficult. Our risks here within Swansea are more around far right and extreme right extremism. That's not to say that we don't focus on all forms of ideology that seek to undermine our values. The prevent referrals are constant. There's always a need for more. I think it comes down to the ability to educate people to understand how they see signs of potential radicalization and what they do with that information. We're not a tier 1 site, so we have no funding. So we have to do it with the resources we've got. And probably 4 years ago, I went to every school in Swansea and delivered training to both primary and secondary schools about the threat and risk. I chair channel, so I have seen some of the referrals that have been made and the intervention and what that intervention looks like to reduce that threat and risk. We used to be able to call it vulnerability, but it's now susceptibility that we've got to use. National Action, we're here in Swansea. They're a prescribed organisation, and two of those individuals, in particular, one is probably doing 8 or 9 years. He was from Swansea, lived in Carmarthenshire. So we do have a history of it, and we have been actually held up as an area of best practice with the Home Office, with how we deal with that risk. We're looking to set up a regional prevent group that covers both Neathport, Talbot and Swansea. And that's not to say that it's going to do what we aren't already doing, but I think it will enable us to evolve so that we can include that space of hate and the narrative that sits there. Because at the moment we've got organisations that are working under the threshold of prevent, but are still undermining communities with the language that they're using. And I will say here with one particular organisation, the likes of Tommy Robinson and Britain First are grateful because they're doing their job for them in Wales. So we need to look at what that disruption can look like, and we're working with colleagues both in CT policing and local policing with other partners as well. We are getting prevent referrals, which in one way is good, and another way people will say is quite bad. But it's important that the sooner those referrals are made, the sooner those assessments can be done, and we can put then the right intervention in place. We can call upon Home Office intervention providers through Channel. It's no cost to the partnership, but that enables us then to work with a whole host of other organisations in addressing that vulnerability to an ideology. And in fact, the director of Prevent in a meeting last week, when I asked about that space about hate, which we're seeing fueled by particularly the issues in Israel and Palestine, where it is here in Swansea, it is happening here in Swansea, and it is divisive. And our graffiti removal teams are being targeted by people from both sides of the conflict. So we're well cited on it, and I think to reassure the committee here, we have good systems in place here to manage that risk. And clearly, if the risk level is one that is of CT, then police and CT policing will own that risk. We're more about that safeguarding arrangement to reduce that risk to ideology.
Okay. Chris, you got a follow up on this?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because safeguarding in school is radicalisation, is part of the five strands of safeguarding. And I can remember some years ago seeing a picture by a little boy showing his father with a gun and killing, shall we say, other people with the Star of David on them. And that took place in our community, and it's not far under the surface, and you really need to keep an eye on it all the time. And I can remember one particular incident in the Globe pub in Landor, and I see you smiling because you may have been one of the ones filming it, but I can remember what happened there, and a certain individual who are not around anymore, I don't think anyway, and it does tend to make you think that in any community it can happen. All you need is that spark, and all you need is that person that has got a driven hatred to do it. And it's amazing how quickly it starts. And there are certain groups of communities within our city boundaries who I think would become very vulnerable if something like that happened.
No, I couldn't agree more. I mean, when ISIS, going back a number of years, particularly when the 3 young lads from Cardiff went to the caliphate there, we had issues here in Swansea of people going online and showing young people beheadings. And it's about how we avoid people becoming desensitized to some of the things that are going on. But yes, it's difficult, and those conversations are incredibly difficult, but they need to be had. And I'm very encouraged to hear that radicalisation is on there, because we pushed for that when I was doing my rounds with the schools to make sure that it's recognised, because it is important.
Okay, Francesca.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be super quick because I appreciate it's gone on for some time, but it has been really interesting, actually, discussion. Two observations, if I may, as a councillor in Mumbles, and I probably speak on behalf of the other two councillors as well. We saw that footage last week, which you alluded to earlier on, with the stingers being deployed in Mumbles. So a huge thank you to the team and the specialist team. You know, that doesn't just happen off the cuff. So we do appreciate that, and I do welcome that action. I know that's been an issue in the ward for quite a few years now. So thank you to the team, first and foremost. Reading the report as well, apologies if I pronounced this incorrectly, Operation Grailer, is that, to tackle illegal off-road bikes. I see that that's sort of planned for the year ahead. Have you got any ideas where, in any particular areas? It was going to allude to, are you going to be coming to Mumbles? But we look forward to that. And if there's any information you can share with us on that, that would be fantastic. And thank you.
Mark.
So we're very fortunate to have some analytical support. So what we're going to do is try and hotspot where those incidents have been reported in the past. But going back to those problem-solving groups I mentioned earlier on, if you as councillors feel, look, we'd really like you to focus on specific areas, I would really encourage you to feed that information through, and we'd be very much led by yourselves in terms of those areas where you think, you know, that there is a need for us to show some more visibility. So I'd encourage that going forward.
That would be amazing. And fine. And just really quickly, because the PCOs, I will say, just to put on record, in Mumbles, they are absolutely fantastic, and they really are. I don't think there's a week that goes by that I don't have a meeting or engagement with them. So they really are a credit to the service.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right, we haven't got any more questions. Can I thank you all very much for coming along, and hope it's been a very useful and constructive session. And we look forward to, we'll write a letter to the partnership, and hopefully we'll get some response to some of the issues which was raised. And I look forward to getting the report on drugs to look at as well, so at some stage. Okay, thanks very much indeed. Thank you. Okay. Right, we're going to move on to item 7, which is the Scrutiny Performance Panel Progress Report. And Chris, anything you want to add to this?
It's there for people to read. Just very, very quickly, you see the key activities. Financial monitoring is probably the most important. We do performance monitoring as well, but we've taken over development and regen monitoring. As you can see, there's a lot of this is done in private session because of the commercial confidentiality that's involved in it. And the one achievement against the corporate priorities, that is a yearly report, which we are quite encouraged about at the moment. A couple of things we are concerned about: recycling and landfill, and the performance monitoring report. That is, I think, one that we looked for. The one that really concerned us the last couple of weeks or last couple of months was the cracks in the foundation building safety in Wales. One which we have had a report last week, and we have asked for a further investigation when the new report comes forward, which will hopefully be within 6 months. As you can see, in May, we'll be looking at the planning annual performance report and city centre retail. And if anybody got any questions, I'll try and answer.
Anybody got any questions? No? Okay. Thank you, Chris. Item 8 is membership of scrutiny panels and working groups. You've got the report. There's no changes in there. Item 9, scrutiny work programme. The last meeting of this particular this council year is on the 14th of May, and we're looking to have the Swansea Public Services Board here. We'll be taking the latest Welsh Language Standards annual report, and we're also having an end of year review. So if you can think of things we've done well, things we've done badly, to feed into that, be quite useful. And we'll also have the chair of governance and audit here to make a contribution to that as well. So thank you for that. Item 10 is scrutiny letters, which you've got there for information. And item 11 is the date and time of upcoming scrutiny panel and working group meetings. So unless anybody's got anything else, can I thank you very much and then call the meeting to an end. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks all. Bye.
Bye.